Okay, chapter 10. Coriolanus knew bombs, and they terrified him. Even as the impact threw him off his feet and tossed him farther into the arena, his arms lifted to cover his head. When he hit the ground, he automatically flattened onto his belly, cheek pressed into the dust. One arm bent up to guard his exposed eye and clear. The first explosion, which seems to have come from the main gate, initiated a chain of eruptions around the arena. Running was out of the question. It was all he could do to cling to the rumbling ground, hope for it to stop, and try to keep his panic in check. He entered what he and Tigris had nicknamed bomb time, that surreal period when moments stretched and contracted in ways that seemed to defy science. During the war, the capital had assigned every citizen a shelter near the residence. The Snow's magnificent building had a basement level so sturdy and spacious. It accommodated not only its residents, but half the block. Unfortunately, the capital's surveillance system depended heavily on electricity. With the power sketchy and the grid flickering on and off like a firefly due to the rebel interference in District 5, the sirens were unreliable and they were often caught unawares with no time to retreat to the basement. At these times, he, Tigris, and Greyman, unless she was singing the anthem, would hide under the dining table, an impressive thing carved from a single block of marble, which sat in an interior room. Even with the absence of windows and the solid rock over his head, Coriolanus's muscles always went rigid with terror when he heard the whistling of the bombs, and it would be hours before he felt he could walk right. The streets weren't safe either, nor the academy. You could be bombed anywhere, but usually he had a better place to shelter than this. Now, naked to the attack, lying in the open air, he waited for the interminable bomb time to end, and wondered how much damage his internal organs were incurring. No hovercraft. The realization bubbled up in his brain. There had been no hovercraft. These bombs had been planted then. He could smell smoke, so some of them were probably incendiary. He pressed his daily handkerchief over his mouth and nose. Squinting through the black haze thickened with dirt from the arena, he could see Lucy Gray about 15 feet away, curled up in a ball, forehead on the ground, and fingertips lodged in her ears, which was the best she could do with her cuffs on. She coughed helplessly. "Cover your face, use the napkin," he called out. She didn't look over, but must have heard, because she rolled to her side and retrieved it from her pocket. The biscuits and chicken fell to the ground as she pressed the cloth to her face. He had a vague thought that this would not be conducive to her singing. A lull fooled him into thinking the episode had ended, but just as he lifted his head, a final explosion in the stands above him demolished what would have been a snack stand. That pink spun sugar, those caramel-coated apples, and burning debris rained down on him. Something struck his head hard, and the heavy weight of the beam landed diagonally across his back, pinning him to the ground. Stunned, Coriolanus lay almost senseless for a bit. The acrid smell of burning stung his nose, and he realized the beam was on fire. He tried to pull himself together and wriggle free, but the world swam, and the peach pie turned sour in his stomach. "Help!" he cried. Similar pleas came from around him, but he couldn't see the injured through the crowd. "Help!" The fire singed his hair, and with a renewed effort he tried to struggle from under this beam, but to no avail. A searing pain began to eat in his neck and shoulder as the horrifying realization that he was burning to death overtook him. He screamed again and again, but seemed alone in the bubble of dark smoke and flaming rubble. Then he could make out a figure rising from the inferno. Lucy Gray said his name, then snapped her head around, something out of his view catching her attention. Her feet took a few steps away from him, then she hesitated, apparently torn. "Lucy Gray," he pleaded in a ragged voice, "please." She gave a last look at whatever had tempted her and ran to his side. The beam shifted off his back, but then slammed down again. It rose a second time, leaving him just enough room to drag himself beneath it. She helped him to his feet. With his arms slung across her shoulder, they limped away from the flames until they collapsed somewhere in the middle of the arena. At first, coughing and gagging required all of his attention, but he slowly registered the pain in his head, the burns along his neck, the back, and shoulders. Somehow his fingers were knotted in Lucy Gray's scorched skirt, as if it were his lifeline. Her cuffed hands, visibly burned, curled nearby. The smoke settled enough that he could see the pattern the bombs had planted at intervals around the arena, with the mother lode of explosives placed at the entrance. So great was the damage that he caught a glimpse of the street beyond on two forms fleeing the arena. Was that what had given Lucy Gray pause before she came to his aid? The possibility of escape? Other tributes had surely availed themselves of the opportunity. Yes, he heard the sirens now, the shouts in the street. Medics picked their way over the rubble and ran for the wounded. "It's okay," he told Lucy Gray. "Help is here." Hands reached for him, settled onto a stretcher. He released her ruffles, thinking there would be another stretcher for her, but as they carried him off, he could see a peacekeeper force her to her stomach and jam the barrel of a gun in her neck, yelling a string of profanities at her. "Lucy Gray!" Coriolanus cried out. No one paid attention to him. The blow to his head made concentration hard, but he was aware of the ambulance ride, banging through the doors to the same waiting area where he'd drunk his fizzy lemon soda just the day before, and then being moved onto a table under a bright light while a team of doctors tried to assess the damage. He wanted to sleep, but they kept pushing their faces into his and demanding answers, their stale lunch breath making him queasy again. Into machines, out of machines, needles jabbing him, and finally blissfully being allowed to drift off. Periodically through the night, someone would wake him and shine lights in his eyes. As long as he could answer a few basic questions, they let him fall back into oblivion. When he finally really woke on Sunday, the light through the window said, "Afternoon," and the Grandmam and Tigris were leaning over him with worried looks. He felt a warm reassurance. "I'm not alone," I thought. "I'm not in the arena. I'm safe." "Hi, Corio," said Tigris. "It's us." Hello, he attempted to smile. You missed bomb time. Turns out it was worse than being there, said Tigris, knowing you were going through it all alone. I wasn't alone, he said. The morphling and the concussion made it hard to recall things clearly. Lucy Gray was there. She saved my life, I think. He couldn't quite get his mind around the idea, sweet but unsettling too. Tigris gave his hand a squeeze. Not surprised. She's obviously a good person. Right from the beginning, she tried to protect you from the other tributes. The Grandmam needed more convincing. After he patched through together a timeline of the bombing of her, she came to this conclusion. Well, like as not she decided the peacekeepers would gun her down if she ran, but still, it shows some character. Perhaps, as she claims, she's not really district. High praise indeed, or as high as the Grandmam would like to muster. As Tigris filled him in the details he missed, he realized how on the edge the event had made the capital. What had happened, at least what the Capital News claimed had happened, frightened citizens with both its immediate fallout and its ramifications for the future. They didn't know who set the bombs. Rebels, yes, but from where? They could have been from any of the 12 districts or a ragtag bunch that escaped the District 13, or even fate forbid some long-dormant cells in the capital itself. The timeline for the crime was baffling. Since the arena stood empty, locked, and ignored between Hunger Games, the bombs could have been placed 6 days or 6 months before. Security cameras covered the entrances around the oval, but the crumbling exterior made scaling the structure possible. They didn't even know if the bombs had been triggered remotely or by a false step, but the unexpected losses shook the capital to its core. That the two tributes from District 6 had been killed by shrapnel caused little concern, but the same explosion had taken the lives of the Ring twins. 3 mentors had been hospitalized, Coriolanus, Androcles Anderson, and Gaius Breen, who'd been assigned to the District 9 tributes. His 2 classmates were in critical condition, Gaius having lost both his legs, and almost everyone else, whether mentor, tribute, or peacekeeper, had needed medical care of some sort. Coriolanus felt bewildered. He genuinely liked Polo and Didi, how they doted on each other, how upbeat they'd been. Somewhere nearby, Androcles, who aspired to be a reporter at Capital News like his mother, and Gaius, a Citadel brat with endless supply of terrible jokes, were barely hanging on to life. What about Lysistrata? Is she all right? She'd been behind him. Grandma looked at Carpenter. Oh, her, she's fine. She's going around saying that big ugly boy from District 12 protected her by throwing his body over her, but who knows? The Vickers family loves the spotlight. Do they? Said Coriolanus skeptically. He could not recall not once ever seeing a Vickers in the spotlight except for a brief annual news conference in which they gave President Ravenstill a clean bill of health. The Sastra was still a self-contained, efficient person who never drew attention to herself. To even suggest she could be put in the same class as Arachne rubbed him the wrong way. She only made one quick statement to the reporter right after the bomb. I expected it was the truth, Grandmam, said Tigris. Perhaps the people of District 12 are not quite as bad as you paint them. Both Jessup and Lucy Gray behaved bravely. Have you seen Lucy Gray on TV, I mean? Does she look okay? I don't know, Corio. They haven't shown any footage of the zoo, but she's not on the list of dead tributes, said Tigris. Are there more than the ones from District 6? Coriolanus didn't want to sound morbid, but they were Lucy Gray's competition. Yes, some others died after the bombing, Tigris told him. Both pairs from District 1 and 2 had made for the hole blown open near the entrance. The District 1 kids had been shot dead. The girl from 2 had made it to the river and leaped over the wall, only to die in the fall. And Marcus had disappeared completely, leaving a desperate, dangerous, powerful boy loose somewhere in the city. A displaced manhole cover suggested that he might have climbed underground to the transfer, the network of tracks and roadways built under the capital, but nobody's for sure. I suppose they see the arena as a symbol, said Grandmom, just as they did during the war. Worst part is they took almost 20 seconds before they cut the transmission to the district, so no doubt it was cause for celebration. Beasts that they are. But they say hardly anyone in the district saw Grandmam, Tigris counted. The people there don't like to watch the Hunger Games coverage. We'll only take a handful to get the word out, said Grandmam. It's just the kind of story that catches fire. The doctor who talked to the Coriolanus after the snake attack entered, introducing himself as Dr. Wayne. He sent Tigris and Grandmom home and gave Coriolanus a quick checkup, explaining the nature of the concussion, fairly mild, the burns, which were responding well to treatment. It would take some time to heal completely, but if he behaved himself and continued to improve, he'd be released in a couple of days. You know how my tribute's doing? Her hands were burned rather badly, said Coriolanus. Each time he thought of her, he felt a stab of uneasiness, but then the morphling would wrap around like cool cotton wool. I wouldn't know, said the doctor, but they've got a top-notch veterinarian over there. I expect she'll be fine by the time they got the games up and running. That's not your concern, young man. Your concern is to get well. For that, you need sleep. Coriolanus was happy to oblige. He slipped back into sleep and didn't fully come to until Monday morning. With his aching head and battered body, he felt no rush to leave the hospital. The air condition eased the burns, and the skin and the generous portions of bland food appeared regularly. He caught up on the news and the large-screen television while he sipped as much fizzy lemon drink as he could. A double funeral was to be held for the Ring twins the following day. The manhunt for the Marcus continued. Both the capital and the districts were under heightened security. 3 mentors dead, 3 hospitalized. Really, 4 if you counted Clementia. 6 tributes dead, 1 escaped, several wounded. If Dr. Gall wanted a makeover for the Hunger Games, she'd gotten it. In the afternoon, the parade of visitors began with Festus, sporting a sling on his arm and a few stitches where a shard of metal had sliced his cheek. He had said the academy had canceled classes, but the students were supposed to show up the next morning for the Rings funeral. He choked up at the mention of the twins, and Coriolanus wondered if he would have more emotional response himself once they removed the morphling drip, which muted both pain and joy. Soteria popped in with some bakery cookies related to the well wishes of the faculty and told him that while the incident was unfortunate, it could only improve his chances for a prize. After a bit, an uninjured Sejanus appeared with Coriolanus's book bag from the van and stack of his mother's delicious meatloaf sandwiches. He had little to say on the subject of his runaway tribute. Finally, Tigris came with the Grand Mammon, who remained home to rest, but he sent a clean uniform for her to wear on his discharge. If there were cameras, she wanted him to look his best. They split the sandwiches, and then Tigris stroked his aching head until he dozed off, just as she had when headaches plagued him as a child. When someone awakened him in the wee hours of Tuesday, he supposed the nurse had come to check his vital signs, then started at the sight of Clementia's ravaged face above his. The snake venom, or the antidote perhaps, had left her golden-brown skin peeling, and the whites of her eyes the color of egg yolks. But much worse was the twitching that affected her entire body, causing her face to grimace, her tongue to jut periodically from her mouth, and her hands to jerk away even as they reached for his. "Shh," she hissed. "I shouldn't be here. Don't tell them I came. But what are they saying? Why has no one come to see me? Do my parents know what happened? Do they think I'm dead?" Groggy from sleep and medication, Coriolanus couldn't quite wrap his mind around what she was saying. "Your parents? They haven't seen you? I saw them." "No, no one's seen me," she cried. "I have to get out of here, Corio. I'm afraid she's going to kill me. It's not safe. We're not safe." "What? Who's going to kill you? You're not talking sense," he said. "Dr. Gall, of course." She clutched his arm, awakening his burns. "You know you were there." Coriolanus tried to free his fingers. "You need to go back to your room. You're sick, Clemmy. It's the snake bites. They're making you imagine things." "Did I imagine this?" She ripped back the opening of her gown to reveal a patch of skin that extended over her chest and down her shoulder, mottled with bright blue, pink, and yellow scales. It had the reptilian quality of the snakes in the tank. When he gasped, she shrieked, "It's spreading! It's spreading!" Two of the hospital staff had her then, lifting her up and carrying her from the room. He lay awake the rest of the night thinking of the snakes in her skin and the class cases of Avoxes with their gruesome animal modifications in Dr. Gall's lab. Is that where Clementia was headed? If not, why hadn't her parents seen her? Why did no one except him seem to know what happened? If Clementia died, would he disappear as well, the only witness? Had he put Tigris at risk by telling her story? The pleasant cocoon of the hospital now seemed an insidious trap shrinking to suffocate him. No one checked on him as the hours crept by, which added to this distress. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, Dr. Wayne appeared by his bedside. "I hear Clementia visited you last night," he said cheerfully. "Did she give you a scare?" "A bit," Coriolanus tried to appear nonchalant. "She'll be all right. The venom causes a lot of unusual side effects as it works itself out of the system. That's why we haven't let her parents see her. They think she's quarantined with a highly contagious flu. She'll be presentable in a day or two," the doctor told him. "You can go visit her if you're up to it. Might cheer her up." "All right," said Coriolanus, slightly reassured. But he could not unsee what he'd seen. Not at the hospital, not at the lab. The removal of the morphling drip brought all the fuzzy edges into sharp relief. His suspicions tainted every comfort, from the large breakfast of hotcakes and bacon to the basket of fresh fruit and sweets from the academy, to the news that his performance of the anthem would be replayed for the Rings funeral as both a mark of quality and a nod to his own sacrifices. The pre-funeral coverage started at 7. By 9, the student body again filled the stairs in the front of the academy. Just over a week ago, he felt he was falling into insignificance with his District 12 girl assignment, and now he was being honored for his courage in front of the entire nation. He expected them to show a tape of him singing, but instead, his holographic self appeared behind the podium, and while it was a little watery at first, it settled into a clean, crisp image. People were always saying he resembled his handsome father more every day, but for the first time he could see it. Not just the eyes, but the jawline, the hair, the proud carriage. And Lucy Gray was right. His voice did have real authority. Overall, the performance was quite impressive. The Capitol doubled its efforts made for the Arachne's funeral, which Coriolanus felt appropriate for the twins. More speeches, more peacekeepers, more banners. He didn't mind seeing the twins praised, even extravagantly, and wished they somehow could have known his hologram had opened the event. The dead tribute count had escalated, with the 2 tributes from District 9 having died from their injuries. Apparently, the veterinarian had done their best, but her repeated requests to admit them to the hospital had been refused. Their scarred bodies, along with what remained of the District 6 tributes, were draped over the backs of horses and paraded down Scholars Road. The 2 tributes from 1 and the girl from District 2, as befittingly their cowardly escape attempt, were dragged behind them. Then came a pair of those cage trucks Coriolanus had ridden on his way to the zoo. One for the boy, one for the girl. He strained to see Lucy Gray, but couldn't locate her, which added to his worries. Was she lying inert on the floor, overcome by injuries and hunger? As the twins' matching silver coffins came to focus, all they could think of was this silly game they made up on the playground, their wall called Ring Around the Rings. The rest of the kids would chase Didi and Polo, and then grab hands, forming a circle around them and trapping them. It always ended with the whole lot of them, rings included, laughing their heads off in a heap on the ground. To be 7 again, in a happy pile with his friends, with nutritional crackers waiting at his desk. After lunch, Dr. Wayne said he could be released if he promised to stay calm and get bed rest. And as the charms of the hospital diminished, he changed into his clean uniform at once. Tigris collected him and accompanied him on the trolley, but then had to return to work. Both he and Grandmom spent the afternoon napping, and he awoke to a nice casserole Sejanus' ma had sent over. At Tigris' urging, he went to the bed with the sun, but sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he see the flames all around, feel the trembling earth, smell the choking black smoke. Lucy Gray had been nibbling around the edges of his thoughts, but now he could think of no one else. How was she, healing and fed, or suffering and starving in that awful monkey house? While he had been lying in the air-conditioned hospital with his morphine drip, had the veterinarian attended to her hands? Had the smoke damaged that remarkable voice? In helping him, had she ruined her chances for sponsors in the arena? He felt some embarrassment when he thought of his terror under the beam, but even more so when he remembered what followed. On Capitol TV, the coverage they'd shown of the bombing had been obscured by the smoke, but did it exist? Footage of her rescuing him, and much worse, of him clinging to her ruffled skirt as they waited for her to help to come. His hand fumbled in the drawer of his nightstand and found his mother's compact. As he inhaled the rose-scented powder, his thoughts quieted a bit, but restlessness drove him from his bed. For the next few hours, he wandered the apartment, looking out at the night sky, at the Corso and the neighbors' windows across the way. At some point, he found himself up on the roof amid the grandmom roses and didn't remember having climbed the stairs to the garden. The fresh night air, perfumed by the flowers, helped, but soon brought out about a shivering that made everything hurt again. Tigris found him sitting in the kitchen a few hours before dawn. She made tea, and they ate, remainder of the casserole straight from the pan. The savory layers of meat, potato, and cheese consoled him, as did Tigris' gentle reminder that the situation with Lucy Gray was not of his making. They were both, after all, still children whose lives were dictated by the powers above them. Somewhat comforted, he managed to doze for a few hours before a phone call from Sateria woke him. She encouraged him to attend school that morning, if he could manage. Another mentor tribute meeting had been scheduled with the idea of working towards the interviews, which would not be on a completely voluntary basis. Later, the academy, as he looked down from the balcony in Heavensby Hall, the empty chairs rattled him. He knew in his head that 8 tributes had died, that one was missing, but he hadn't envisioned now that would ripple the pattern of 24 little tables, leaving a jagged, disconcerting mess. No tributes at all from districts 1, 2, 6, or 9, and only 1 from 10. Most of the kids who remained were injured, and all looked unwell. As the mentors joined their assignees, the losses became even more pronounced. 6 mentors were either dead or hospitalized, and their partners with the escapees of 1 and 2 had no tributes at their tables, and therefore no reason to show up. Livia Cardew had been vocal about this turn of events, demanding new tributes be brought from the districts, or at least that she be given Reaper, the boy assigned to Clementia, who everyone thought had been hospitalized with the flu. Her wishes had not been accommodated, and the Reaper sat alone at his table, a bandage stained with rusty dried blood wrapped around his head. As Coriolanus took the seat opposite her, Lucy Gray didn't even attempt to smile. A ragged cough racked her chest, and soot from the fire still clung to her clothing. The veterinarian had exceeded Coriolanus' expectations, though, as the skin on her hands was healing nicely. "Hi," he said, scooting a nut butter sandwich and 2 of Satira's cookies across the table. "Hey," she said hoarsely. Any attempt at flirtation or even camaraderie had been abandoned. She patted the sandwich, but seemed too tired to eat it. "Thanks." "No, thank you for saving my life," he said lightly, but as he gazed into her eyes, the levity leached away. "Is that what you're telling people?" she asked. "That I saved your life?" He had said as much to Tigris and the grandmom, and then, perhaps unsure what to do with the information, let it drift from his thoughts like a dream. Now, with the empty seats of the fallen around them, the memory of how she'd rescued him in the arena demanded his attention, and he cannot ignore its significance. If Lucy Gray had not helped him, he would be utterly, irrevocably dead. Another shiny coffin dripping flowers. Another empty chair. When he spoke again, the words caught in his throat before he could force them out. "I told my family, really. Thank you, Lucy Gray." "Well, I had some time on my hands," she said, tracing the frosted flower on a cookie with a shaky forefinger. "Pretty cookies." Then came confusion. If she had saved his life, he owed her what? A sandwich and 2 cookies? That was how he was repaying her for his life, which apparently he held quite cheaply. The truth was, he owed her everything. He felt the blush burn over his cheeks. "You could have run. If you had, I would have gone up in flames before they reached me." "Run, huh? Seemed like a lot of effort to get shot," she said. Coriolanus shook his head. "You can joke, but it won't change what you did for me. I hope I can repay you in some way." "I hope so too," she said. Those few words, he sensed a shift in her dynamic. As her mentor, he'd been the gracious giver of gifts, always to be met with gratitude. Now she upended things by giving him a gift beyond compare. On the surface, everything looked the same. Chained girl, boy offering food, peacekeepers guarding the status quo. But deep down, things could never be the same between them. He would always be in her debt. She had the right to demand things. "I don't know how," he admitted. Lucy Gray glanced around the room, taking in her wounded competitors. Then she looked him in the eye in an impatient, tender voice. "You could start by thinking I can actually win."